So let me start by saying that if you look broadly at the Belt Road Initiative and what it's actually done, it's improved dramatically the quality of infrastructure in developing countries and enabling those countries to improve their economy at a faster rate. So I just look at that and say that's a noble objective, and they've done reasonably well. Now, anytime you launch something as broad and as complex and involving the funding of a Belt Road Initiative, you're always going to have learnings along the way, and you're going to make corrections to the model. So I was very happy to see that President Xi announced, I think this was probably 2 to 3 years ago, that one of the things they're going to change in how they evaluate investment opportunities in developing countries is they're going to be much more focused on the ability of the country to repay, because everybody loses if a country can't repay, and if they have to give up uh, physical resources or go into debt at a level that creates tension, then the overall objective of the Belt Road Initiative is not going to be met. People are going to be unhappy. So I think it was very constructive for Xi to basically say, we want to evaluate carefully countries' ability to repay. And then the second thing he said is we're committed longer term to environmental sustainability. We want to support projects that are consistent with that. Everybody knows in the short term, a number of countries have no choice from an energy point of view but to use coal. But it should be done with a vision longer term of becoming uh, more focused on sustainable sources of energy. Well, first of all, decoupling is a truly bad idea. Uh, Politicians do not understand that because for them, it sounds like another way to bash China, and therefore they hop on the bandwagon. But if you sat down with a typical congressman and said, what are the implications for supply chains and ultimately inflation rates in the US? Most of them would not have a clue. Okay. So the group we need to stand up and be heard in the US are the corporations. I mean, so if you were to go to CEOs of major corporations and say, why don't you replace your supply chains with China? They would say, we have been building those supply chains over the last 25 years. They enable us to produce our product for 10% less. And if we had to change supply chains, we'd probably go through a minimum 5 year rebuilding period. And whether we would come out of it with lower cost goods is unclear. So the real trade off is, do you want to increase inflation, which is also already running at a pretty high level in the US, by another 3 or 4 points by decoupling supply chains? Makes no sense. And on the other side of the coin is US companies want access to the Chinese consumer market. That's incredibly, and there are many US companies that have figured out how to do business in China in a way that's consistent with the Chinese way. And it's a total win-win. So if you look at how Apple and Procter and Gamble and Coca-Cola and Kentucky Fried, all these companies are very successful in China. And in part, it's because they understand how China works, what China's priorities are, and that the government is all powerful. And so they know that. And so everything they do is based on an insider's knowledge of how China works. And China looks at the results and say, we like what you're delivering for our economy. And the American companies look at the profits they make in China, and it's a total win-win. I would go beyond saying it's important to the world economy. I'd say it's central to the world economy. In other words, if you look at where economic growth has come from globally, I'd say over the last 10 years, the biggest economic contributor by far is China. Because companies in the West are largely chugging along at GDP growth of somewhere around 2-3%. China for many years moving along at 6 to 8%. Now it's slowed down. Obviously, the Russia-Ukraine conflict and what that's doing to the energy sector is a huge contributor. But I think most economists would say if you took China out of the global economy, the economic consequences would be huge. So the other thing that's obviously pretty central is trade. I mean, China is by far the biggest trading partner around the world. So if all of a sudden those trading volumes started drying up, the impact would be huge on the Chinese economy, but it would also be huge on many other countries. China has, because it's done so well economically, has been able to accelerate its investment in advanced technologies at a very impressive rate. So China, which has always been known as the manufacturer of the world, is quickly becoming a technological leader in a lot of areas. So if you look at telecom with Huawei and 5G, if you look at electric vehicles, where the number sold in China dwarfs the number sold anywhere else, if you look at quantum computing, where China is a leader, if you look at artificial intelligence, most experts would say China is at least the equal of the US and is investing a lot more. So the other thing that's going to be, important for China and the rest of the world is to accelerate the technological advances in all of the areas that are driving the economy of the future. And obviously where China is hurting is nano chips because of the sanctions that have been put in place. But there are many other areas where they are already leaders. So, if China gets back to 6% GDP growth, given the scale of its economy, the second order effects about growing the consumer market, which will become increasingly international, and also accelerating the pace of innovation in these key 10 technologies would also have a very significant benefit for the world.